Welcome to episode 308 of Sports Geek. On this week's CEO series, I chat with North Queensland Cowboys Jeff Reibel.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is excited to board an airplane for the first time in over 12 months, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to Sports Geek. Don't forget, you can find every single episode at the Sports Geek website, sportsgeekhq.com. Also, you can get the Sports Geek newsletter by signing up at sportsgeekhq.com, and you can find this podcast on most podcast platforms. If you can leave a review, especially those on the Apple Podcast Store, really do appreciate it. As always, you can contact me via social media at Sean Callanan on most platforms, at Sports Geek on Twitter as well, or you can use the old-fashioned way, email Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Before I get into my chat with Jeff Reibel from the North Queensland Cowboys, just a quick wrap of 2022. This will be the 21st episode for 2022. Production has been a little bit down, as I explained in the last episode. Took a little bit of a break, a bit of COVID fatigue, I guess. So down on previous years, but I'm really pleased with the quality of guests and the output that was there. And thank you very much for everyone who was a guest. And thank you very much for listening. We did release the first series of Sports Geek Amplify this year. It was a great success, and thank you again to the partners that signed up for Sports Geek Amplify. They are terrific. Please check out those episodes. Blast, Timo, Stellarago, Ubi Park and Zoomph. A great way to learn a little bit more about some great sports technology solutions that are available. But I'm going to review my 2021 after my chat with Jeff. But other than that, don't forget, if you want to kickstart 2022, why not book in for a Pick My Brain session? 2-hour session. We dive in with your team, either on a specific topic or just look at the planning for the year ahead. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. And before I do get into my call, I want to just quick shout out and a quick thank you to the Patreon supporters. You can become a Patreon supporter if you enjoy the podcast and the content that we're producing across multiple channels. You can do so at sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. And please check out the links in the show notes. Please support the businesses that have been supporting the Sports Geek podcast and everything we're doing in the sports business space. Now, I want to get into my chat with Jeff Reibel, the CEO of the North Queensland Cowboys. Very happy to welcome North Queensland Cowboys CEO Jeff Reibel to the podcast. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Sean, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be here.
It's good to see you. I haven't been up in Townsville for a few years. Obviously, the world has changed a lot in that time. But where I'd like to start is, how did you get your start in the world of sports business?
Look, it's a very interesting conversation, and I suppose something when I reflect on it, I sometimes pinch myself still, Sean. So I was very fortunate. My youngest brother could play a bit of football, and he relocated. We're from a small place called Bowen in North Queensland. Yep. He relocated to Townsville when he was in grade 11 on a scholarship with the Cowboys. He was allocated to Townsville Grammar School, one of the fine schools here. I was working there as a business manager. And essentially, he needed lifts to and from training for his spot in the development team. From there, I got to know some people at the Cowboys, and my very, very first job in sport professionally was in 1997 as the manager of our under-17 team. Okay. So I got to know a little bit around the rugby league side of professional sport before I actually then started on the business side. And it was in 2002 when the then commercial manager of the club, I was studying an MBA with him. And I was a business manager of a local college called Ryan Catholic College. Yep. He invited me over with the opportunity to start as the corporate sales manager of the Cowboys in 2002. And it sort of flourished from there, Sean.
So you're in that sales marketing role with the Cowboys, for 7 or 8 years, and sort of learning the ropes. and I guess also selling everything, working with different partners, learning the commercialization of sport in that 2003 to 2010 range?
Look, I was, Sean, and it was something even as a kid that I always had an interest in. And, I was never a gifted sportsman, but I loved sport. So to be able to work in my passion is something that I feel really privileged about. But I talk about this a lot. When my mates were playing footy or when we were watching footy on the telly back then, I was more worried about, or more interested, I should say, is how come Newcastle has Henny Penny across their jersey? What's Video Easy got to do with Canberra? What is Power with the Broncos when they first started? And I was really interested and actually drawn to how does that intersect with business and how does that then work into the sporting world? So that was something that I was really quite interested in. And as that role grew from selling originally, Sean, just corporate boxes and facilities at our old stadium for the Cowboys, grew into more of a marketing role and business development role. And that's where I got exposed to how to build a partnership, a commercial partnership built on values, built on tailoring all of the benefits and the outcomes based on working with partners. And I really still have a great intrigue about that and how that works all around the world, mate.
I think there'll be a few nodding heads listening to this. I know I went to Golden State Warriors with a good friend of mine, Stacey McGrainer, and we spent half the game, even though Steph Curry was shooting three-pointers, we were looking at the signage and wondering, how did they sell that little piece of signage to that sponsor? What was the proposition? So I think there's a few people that might be listening that might be nodding their heads as well. So you went from that role, and then you went to a rival team in the Gold Coast Titans in a sponsorship role. What was the?
Yeah, I did.
What were some of the differences coming from the Cowboys to the Titans, and I guess in that newer role of more of a sponsorship focus?
Yeah, and Sean, it was a real eye-opener, not just from a sponsorship focus, but also the differences between the clubs. So North Queensland, and for those that may be listening to us that don't understand the geography of it, we have a footprint larger than the whole state of New South Wales. That's the footprint of North Queensland, and we're a community-owned and community-based club. And we moved down to the Gold Coast, which is where my wife's from, and had this fantastic opportunity with the Gold Coast Titans, which was a privately owned club at the time, which it is now as well. But also because of the uniqueness of the Gold Coast, the transient nature of it, I think this was the third incarnation of the Gold Coast as well. That community engagement and that community support, I suppose, the business and commercial engagement was different down there. And I must admit, it took me a little while to adjust, because up here in North Queensland, it still happens. You look someone in the eye, you shake their hand, and you can move forward with things. And down on the Gold Coast, it took me a little while that, I wasn't in a community of 200,000 anymore. I was in a community of 1.2 million, a community with, the powerhouse of the NRL being the Brisbane Broncos just an hour north of it as well. So I really enjoyed my time at the Titans. It was short-lived though, Sean. It was around that 18 months mark. And I had some great experiences with the engagement where we went from Jetstar being the major partner through to iSelect. So that was the first time iSelect actually entered into the sport marketing world in Australia as well. And probably a highlight there was, if you might recall, all of the old ads with Mr. iSelect that went everywhere. We actually got to do some adverts with our players, Jamal Indris, Luke Bailey, and that at the time, mate. And I thought, I sat back and thought, wow, look where I am doing this, and what a great type of partnership to have, an interactive partnership. So I was there 18 months, Sean, and then something that always intrigued me as well was motorsport. And in Australia, supercars at the time were really knocking on the door of, cricket, the NRL and the AFL, looking to be up there from a commercialisation and also like cricket, a true cross-Australia sport, and also into New Zealand and overseas. So there was an opportunity, there was a little opening at Stone Brothers Racing. And for anyone that follows supercars, Ross and Jimmy Stone are absolute legends of the game. And drivers like Marcus Ambrose, Russell Ingall, recently Shane Van Gisbergen, and even Lee Holdsworth, who won Bathurst just the other weekend, were all proteges of Ross and Jimmy. So they were actually looking for more of a promotions manager. But I went in there and I presented to Ross and the commercial manager, Chris Wilson, and I know Chris listens, and he's over now running Penske's motorsport operation over in the States.
Yep.
I presented to them as to why I think they could do with a business development manager, what I could bring from my background in rugby league, bring it over to motorsport. Because, Sean, I always thought, and when I was here in Townsville, down on the Gold Coast, you watch this show come to town for 4 or 5 days in supercar, and they just do this marvellous job. You know, they sell out on merchandise, they really engage while they're there. And I'm thinking, how does all this work? And so I had an opportunity to join that team for initially 18 months. And then that morphed into what's known now as Erebus Motorsport, where it was bought out by Betty Clemenco. And we went through that being from a Ford factory team over to being an AMG customer sport team. That was when they bought Mercedes to the grid. So a bit of an eye-opener for me, 130 nights on the road, which was probably a downside of the role, and also the fact that, you know, when it comes to talking V6, V8, what's under the hood, as my dad will tell you, the old Telstra ad of under the bonnet, son, that's about where I sit on that, mate. So fantastic opportunity, sporting-wise and commercial-wise, but something, again, that I've been able to bring back into rugby league when I come back up north again in 2015.
Yeah, so you've been back at the Cowboys since 2015 in sales, and then in a chief commercial officer, and then moved into the CEO's role in 2018 and officially from Feb 2019. What's been your initial impressions moving into the CEO role, and how is it different, from being in the commercial focused sponsorship side of the business?
So I think, mate, the role itself is something that I've always aspired to, and there's no doubt the grounding that I had from that commercial side of it has allowed me to be able to understand the business as I come into it. But now it's also being across, not only that commercial side, but also the ins and outs of our football program. That's our core business. When you look at what our purpose is, and for all the wonderful things that we do around and in the community and in and around this wonderful new centre, it's for the success of football. Every decision we make comes back to how is that going to make our footy team, help our footy team win or make us win. So what I've really found, mate, is the length and breadth of the role I've really enjoyed, as well as that commercial and sporting focus. We have a foundation, so we have that community focus. But probably the one thing that I really enjoy here, mate, is that we've just got wonderful people. We've got passionate people, which you need in the sporting industry, because I think the old adage is, how do you make a fortune in sport? You start with a larger one. And that also comes down to, the hours that we work, the way that we engage, and the role models that we have inside and outside of our clubs. So, mate, I look forward, without sounding cliche-ish, every day to getting in the seat and what the day is going to bring. And there's no doubt, with what the world experienced over the last 18 to 20 months with COVID, that certainly has brought another element of ensuring operationally that we're able to pivot, to roll, and be able to respond to the environment that we're in.
Yeah, it is a common thread in talking to other CEOs that have come from different areas of the business, that they get into the top seat, and you're that direct connection to operations, the football side. And so it's that balancing act of having the right people in charge, of the football department and your coaching staff, but also having some insight and governance around how you can best support them, and how, the commercial team can bring in the revenue that supports them. How have you navigated that piece? Because it's really a new world, and you're like, oh, should I be getting in? The footy fan in you gets in there and goes, oh, hey, can I move moving magnets around, or can I get the water?
No, I think there's a very clear place, and you're right. As the CEO of any organisation, that you're there to lead, you're there to inspire, but you're also there, in my opinion, I call my leadership style a conscientious leadership style, and that's using and engaging with the people around me and the talents that they have. My remit when it comes to football is, if the coach is looking to fix the left edge defence, I'm not the person that does that, but I'm the person to make sure that the coach and everybody in the football department has the facility, the resource, the know-how and the expertise to go ahead and do that. And I learned very early on, even when I crossed over back from footy into the commercial side of the business, that everybody has a crucial part of the cog of the wheel to play. And in this one, you have that too. You have that, again, coaches coach, football managers manage, your star players and your players play. You are, I suppose, the glue that gels all of that together, and also the one that needs to balances the priorities and explain why you might have to go and do that certain sponsor engagement, why it's important that we go and meet this person, or how then I have to then push back on somebody else because the coach and the players need their preparation there. So it's very important you don't overstep your mark there, but it's also very important that you remain challenging and you're also there as a support mechanism.
You mentioned there the providing the facilities and the best platform for both your the back of house team and the admin side, but then also the football side. You've had a couple of big projects with the stadium and then a purpose-built headquarters, Hutchison Builders Centre. They've obviously been some big projects in your first couple of years in the role. Tell us about those projects and how they've been able to set up the Cowboys.
Yeah, I'll start with the stadium because, having a state-of-the-art 25,000-seat stadium just next door to where I'm sitting at the moment. And again, for those that wouldn't be familiar, our previous stadium, as much as we loved it, it was a remodeled harness racing track. Yep. It rains for half a year up here. We didn't have any roof to cover any spectators. It was, we knew all the quirks about it, but for us to survive, we needed to move and come into a stadium that is located now 1 kilometre from the centre of the city here in Townsville. People are undercover. It has all of the modern conveniences, not only for the athletes, but also the crowd, and that's whether that's a general seat right up to the differentiated corporate options. And we're very fortunate, Sean, that we have 200,000 people within a 1 hour's drive of Townsville, and we average 17,000 people at our games, okay? Of those 17,000 people, 30% of them will drive an hour to get here. Yep. 10% of them will drive 4 hours to get here. So what we needed to do is ensure that we rewarded those people with things that a lot of other sports fans and members have had for a long time. And that's, whether that be integrated in-seat Wi-Fi while they're here, simple things like having food and beverage concessions and stalls that actually, were able to keep up with a crowd of 25,000. And I can tell you after all of the build-up that our opening night was against the Brisbane Broncos, who are our traditional rivals there in March of 2020. That opening night, that morning, I received a phone call from the Queensland government representative about 7 a.m. and said, "Jeff, the game's off." And I said, "Why is that?" And that was the start of COVID, or coronavirus as we knew it back then. Yep. And then by 1 o'clock it was, "Jeff, the game's on, but there's no crowds." And that, Sean, that was so foreign to us only just 2 years ago. And I said, "Well, I don't know what you're doing with all the police that you've got stationed for the night, but you better keep them because there'll be a bloody riot." And it truly wasn't until about 3 o'clock when the PM came out and said, to Australia, "Enjoy your footy this weekend because we're going into lockdown on Monday." So that was quite a surreal experience where, we had so much hard work, dedication and foresight by the leaders of our club and our community at the levels of government into this stadium next door. But what it was actually able to deliver during COVID is something that Townsville, North Queensland's never seen. I mean, we held State of Origin on 6 days' notice halfway through 2020. We had a double-header, that's a double-header rugby union test match. Wallabies in Argentina and New Zealand played, the All Blacks played in Townsville against the South Africans. Held rugby 7 carnivals and the like. So it actually brought other sports into Townsville, into North Queensland. And this stadium was the reason for that. So the foresight, again, by the government, it's a $300 million investment around that time, has just brought our opportunities to another level, but our region's opportunities to another level. And our region is so important to us. The economic impact that we put into the region is over $160 million per year as a group. Now, what that also means is, that we have some very passionate, engaged people up this way that come and watch our games. So what we had for the first time was this stadium, and we had already made the decision about building what we now call the Hutchison Builders Centre, which is now called the Cowboys Community Training and High Performance Centre. And it was really interesting and quite the timing that we broke ground 2 months prior to COVID. And in one of those, I suppose, scenarios that you never thought you would imagine, we had to make the decision, and our board, I've got such a fantastic board from our chairman through to the rest of our 7 board, is we had to make the decision of should we continue the build through the pandemic? Yep. And we made that decision to do that. So on one hand, we had to stand down 90% of our staff when we shut down playing in May of last year. And on the other hand, we commenced a $40 million build. And I'm so grateful that we made that decision because we're sitting in here today. It's a 3-story complex. The whole bottom floor is high performance. You have everything from your cold pools, your hot pools, saunas. We have an altitude. We even have a heat chamber in North Queensland, which is very interesting, sitting in front of government telling them why we need a heat chamber.
That is a strange one in tropical North Queensland, but
it is, mate.
If you get away with it, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, agreed. Downstairs we have an indoor training area, which was something that was very important to us because we lost about 20 days due to the weather up here, not just because of the rain, but also the heat and also the humidity that comes with it. So we've got an indoor training area, which then can double, which is astroturfed, stuff brought in from the States, but then it also doubles as a basketball court. So during our off season, we had the Townsville Fire, which is in the WNBL here. They come in and did their 7 weeks of preseason. We laid down a basketball court for them downstairs. The level that I'm on here, level 1, what that is that's where all of our coaching administrative officers are. We've got the fully integrated studio with live links in there, the lecture theatres, all of that wonderful material that you've seen around the world. I suppose the differentiator for us is up on level 2 above me, where we have 1,800 square metres that we're letting out to tenants. And the whole idea is to create our own high performance and sports medical ecosystem upstairs. And at present, James Cook University, which is the local North Queensland uni, their sports science department works out of a 300 square metre facility upstairs, and that integrates down with our high performance staff and area downstairs as well as our players. We have a physio upstairs. We have a sports physician upstairs with 4 doctors, and we also have an orthopaedic surgeon's rooms upstairs as well. So there's a bit of a multi-pronged vision there where, firstly, it's going to create the revenue that will allow us to pay off the debt that we have around the facility. We went from being a leasee to the Queensland government at our old place to being in debt of around $20 million for this, with the other $20 million coming in the form of grants from government. The other thing that we wanted up there is for our athletes. So our athletes or our players, if something was to go wrong on the training field behind me, we've got a vision, and we're nearly there, where a player will not have to leave this facility to be diagnosed, to be scanned, and then be able to be rehabbed. So that also then creates this holistic performance facility for our athletes. The third item up there is in North Queensland, we still have to fly down south for certain operations and certain medical procedures. Creating and bringing new or other diversified medical professionals up to North Queensland is something that we thought we would be able to achieve with upstairs, and we're on our way with that. So of the 1,800 squares, half of that is leased out, and the other half, we're in talks with various companies around that. If it was to be a call centre, we could have leased it out 4 or 5 times, but we want to stay true to what it's about and create that, I suppose, that environment, but also the way to activate this precinct where, just 5 years ago, where we're sitting is old disused rail yards, and it was an eyesore right next to the middle of the city. Now you've got a stadium, you have the centre where I am here. Behind me is a Doubletree Hilton Motel going in, and the potential for another indoor training venue over the road there. So it's about reactivating via the city, which again gives Townsville another economic plug.
Yep. And then the thing is, community is a big part of it. All of these services that previously anyone who lived in Townsville or anyone in North Queensland all had to travel to these services. So if the Cowboys can bring them to provide you with some advantages on the pitch, but it's also a tremendous benefit to the community, because it's very much, a massive, you're a massive club, but still very much connected with the community.
Yeah, we were, Sean, you're right. We were built on community back in 1995. The original purpose of us entering the NRL, or the ARL as it was back then, was there was too many North Queenslanders having to leave North Queensland to get on the national stage. So we were able to create this club back in 95 on the back of the community, on the back of some wonderful support, where if you look from a commercial perspective, we were born in 95, yet Forex started sponsoring us back in 93 and paid the CEO's wages and provided him with a car to get around North Queensland to sign players. There was other companies that provide surety to be able to get us into the ARL at the time as well. So that engagement with the community is something that I believe is a point of difference for our club. But it needs to be engagement that actually delivers results. So we have a number of different education programs and engagement programs that simply change people's lives. And when you're talking about that footprint that we have up here, the remoteness of some of the children that we get to talk to about going to school and the like, changing people's lives when you're a footy club is just another wonderful thing to be able to talk about, mate.
Yep. So how do you? I mean, and you would have done it in your sponsorship commercial roles, and it's still very much a focus. Like, how do you tackle both the challenge and the opportunity of being remote and being in the far north, but having this big footprint, but you're not in the hubbub of Sydney and the skyscrapers and all the head offices. So how do you sell Townsville both locally, the community angle, be able to have that really great social outreach opportunity, but then also balancing that with you're on national TV in front of big TV audiences, and you've got a digital footprint. How do you balance that proposition? Because it's easier for the team in Sydney, and we can walk down, there's the harbour, and I can walk to a big corporate headquarters. How do you what's the challenge and the opportunity that Townsville offers?
Yeah. Look, the challenge is getting the people to the plate to start with, Sean. And I remember when I first started, when we weren't having the success that we've been fortunate to have over recent times. And, I'd do the old cold calling, and I'd be talking to a brand down south, and they go, "Oh, look, if you're looking for a local partnership, call the local manager." And then, I'd have to go into the explanation. But I think also it's the power of our brand up here that does attract those larger national companies. But then also the loyalty to it, mate. That's where I think, again, we stand out from the rest. So next year will be our 20th year as the North Queensland Toyota Cowboys. That Toyota partnership enjoys, and we're so proud to be part of an international brand that is so recognisable, sells the most cars in the world. But a key part of that partnership is the 10 Toyota dealers that have their dealerships north up to Cairns, south to Mackay, and west to Mount Isa. They are part of that partnership, and so we can activate in that locally in the community with them, as well as them having that Toyota symbol on the front and back of our jersey. We have partners that we've enjoyed partnerships with over 20 years too, that have grown, that have stuck through us with through the thick and thin. I'm a big relationship based from a partnership perspective. When you look at the structure of our club, we have 3 account executives that look after our partners. We're the number 2 commercial program in the NRL. I'd argue that we probably have some of the longest longevity in the NRL. And that, to me, comes down to that relationship. And I can tell you, once you get them up here, show them a little bit of North Queensland, very similar to a player. Once a player can realise that you can put a support structure around them when they're so far away from home. And we have to do things a little bit differently, because you are right. When a player goes from, let's say, from Cronulla to the West Tigers, they can live in the same house. When they come from Cronulla up here, as Chad Townsend's done, they're moving states, they're leaving their family behind. So it's very important. We've got a tight-knit family, a tight-knit group up here that provides that support structure. So, mate, I would say that, we have the best of both worlds, and something that, again, because of our approach, we can talk to the local, but we can also talk to that national and say, we do punch above our weight, we hold our own, and this is how we go about it.
Terrific. I did want to, before we wrap up, ask you about Nrl Cowboys House. What is it, and why is it so important both to you and the club?
Yeah, look, and thank you for asking about it, Sean, because it's another string to the bow of our club. So Nrl Cowboys House is actually a boarding facility here in Townsville, and it's for 102 students. And every single one of those 102 students, there's 52 girls and 50 boys. Yep. They are from remote Indigenous communities and from communities that they would not have access to a secondary education to. So what we were able to do is work with those individual communities. There's 28 different communities that they're from, right up north to the Torres Strait, out west, down to up to the Lockhart River, down to Doomadgee and the like. And these kids come in and we give them this access to education and remove that barrier of distance that they may have had because of where they're from. And they come from grade 7 and they stay right through to grade 12. And each of these young people then have the opportunity to take what they've learnt, go on to further education or go on to vocational education, but take those skills back to community and really be able to, and again, you hear a lot about closing the gap and whatever it may be.
Yep.
Mate, some of the literacy, some of the numeracy, some of the educational stats are truly, truly horrifying out in not only these remote Indigenous communities, but communities scattered all throughout Queensland. And to use the power of our brand and our ambassadors and our heroes to be able to get these young kids engaged with school is something that's, again, unique to us. So each of these kids, they're not rugby league players. They're coming in. We partner with 10 different schools. We give them, an education. If they need a learner's driver's license, we do that with them. If they want to go and learn how to play the violin, we do that with them as well. So it just provides all of these young people with an opportunity to break that cycle and give them the best start in life. And look, we've had 13 graduates this year. All of them have gone on to work. 14 graduates last year, with 4 of them into university, which is just something that these young people are so proud for.
Oh, well, it's terrific, and again, very much aligns with all your values around being a massive part of the North Queensland community. So do appreciate it. I'm talking to Jeff Reibel, CEO of the North Queensland Cowboys. I want to finish with the closing 5, Jeff. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yeah, this is interesting. So we're talking professional sports, Sean, are we?
Well, yeah, no one can Google it, so you can answer it however you like.
Nice. I'm going to go professional sports.
Yep.
16-year-old, again, little place from Bowen, came up to Townsville, and I watched the Panasonic Cup quarter-final between the Broncos and the Illawarra Steelers. So that was the first time. It was at the Townsville Sports Reserve. I remember I had to sit on the running track to be able to get a view of it. And a bloke that went to school with us in Bowen, his cousin was Mark Hone, and I still remember this, we were only 16. He deliberately missed the bus to get back to Bowen, which is a 2-hour drive, so he could hang out with Mark. Mark, I don't think, realised it was his cousin, to be honest with you. But that's a night that sticks out as my first professional event, mate, yes.
Terrific. Well, you would have been to a fair few sports events and a fair few corporate functions. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
Mate, you can see I'm built for comfort and not speed, and there's a reason for that. Hot chips at the footy, hot chips at the cricket, hot chips anywhere you go. I was fortunate enough to be in a corporate facility watching a Man City game in 2016. They asked me what I'd like for dinner, and I said, mate, have you got any chips with some sauce there, please? So hot chips is the go, I think, Sean.
No problems. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Mate, I'm a little bit traditionalist here. After I get my coffee and get organised, the first thing I go for is the online version of the Townsville Bulletin. So that's the local newspaper up here, mate. I think it's very important whilst I need to be connected with our club nationally. What's going on locally is something that's important. And Townsville Bully is the first one I run with.
Terrific. Now, is there someone that either you follow or you read or a colleague that you know that the Sports Geek podcast listeners should be following, and why?
Yeah, mate, it's actually another podcast. It doesn't cross over with you, though. Okay. It's called the High Performance Podcast. And there's a co-host on there. It's an English-based one. Co-host on there, Damien Hughes. And I can see, is that a Barcelona jersey in the background?
That is
mate?
A Barcelona jersey behind me,
Barcelona
yes.
jersey, yeah. He wrote a book about Barcelona and and I suppose their approach to developing their junior talent and their approach to the business of sport. And it's called the High Performance Podcast, and they have different guests on there. And it really got me thinking, because their first question is, what does high performance mean to you?
Well, I think that was going to be my question on, because high performance can be different things to different people in different sections. Can
I tell you what, after thinking about it, and listening, because, they have guys like Toto Wolff's been on there, Eddie Jones has been on there, but they've had other, probably lesser known people, but just as brilliant people on there.
Yep.
I think high performance is being part of an orchestra. Okay, now just bear with me. All right. So you're playing the flute in a 60-person orchestra. Okay.
Yep.
You got to know your job, when to cut in, when to cut out, when not to be there, when to be able to do it. Right. That's all about high performance down into the last second. So the way that I think about it, it's not just what's happening behind me here while the boys at the gym or whether they're on the field. High performance is in everything that we do and being attuned to your surroundings and your environment, mate.
Yep. Oh, it's a very good analogy. You can see, the finely tuned nature of, whether it's a violinist or, a halfback, same. They're both working on their mechanics and preparing themselves to have that performance in the orchestra to provide the symphony. So it's a good answer. I look forward to when you're on the podcast because you'll blow them away with that opening answer. Lastly, and I'll ask it for you from a club point of view and then potentially a personal point of view. What social media platform is your MVP? So potentially for the Cowboys, and then what's your platform of choice personally?
Yeah, so I'll go with the Cowboys. I will still say that Facebook is probably the most engagement. I think, there's no doubt Instagram these days and the quick nature and people double tapping it, but Facebook still provides that, I suppose, that two-way conversation. So that's on that side of it. Personally, it's and my wife will tell me I'm boring here, but it's LinkedIn, Sean.
It's not boring when you're in sports business, mate. There's a lot of people that have given that answer.
Yeah, I certainly enjoy my LinkedIn feed more than anything else. Like I read Twitter to keep up to date with news and the like, but LinkedIn's is my go-to, mate. Yeah.
Terrific. So that does lead me to the question, where is the best place for people to reach out and say, hey, Jeff, I listened to the podcast, really enjoyed it. I loved your analogy about orchestras. Where's the best place for people to connect with you on the World Wide Web?
On the World Wide Web, look, LinkedIn's the best one. I'm just under Jeff Reibel. Jeff Reibel, North Queensland Cowboys, be that. And my Twitter handle is @Reibs12, REIBS 12. So that was back in the day when I used to try a little bit of back row, Sean.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I really do appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time, and all the best for the off season, and fingers crossed that we can get the next season away in the NRL with as little disruption as possible. But I think we're going to be living with a little bit of a disruption from now on. But hopefully all is well up in North Queensland.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate, again, the opportunity. And can I say thank you for doing what you do as well, mate, to give opportunities to have a chat like this and listen to people from around the world is something that, all you have to do is look back 10 years and I don't think we could do it. And the sports industry now is such a microorganism, isn't it, that we know exactly what's happening everywhere, mate. So thanks very much for doing that.
I appreciate it.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 1 cohort. Timo, Vlast, Stellar Algo, Ubi Park, and Zoof. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Jeff Reibel. You can send him a tweet, Reibs, Reibs 12, on Twitter, or please connect with Jeff Reibel on LinkedIn. There'll be links in the show notes. If you go to sportsgeekhq.com, you can find the links to this show. Don't forget, you can, if you're a listener and you're looking to, recharge your career, maybe get some advice, figure out what you're trying to do. Office hours are going to be open in 2022. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/office hours and book in. Let's have a chat, see how I can help you. Before I get into my year in review, I just want to quickly mention digital to dollars, on how it can work for you and your team. Whether you're, depending on what your different objective is for digital, whether it's fan growth, digital engagement, delivering for sponsors. You'd think I'd stop getting alerts while I'm doing records, but no, 8 years in the making, I'm still getting alerts while I'm doing my voiceovers. Don't forget, that's what digital dollars is for. So the digital dollars process has 5 pillars, but this year I've actually added a 6th. So the 5 pillars you would have known if you heard me talk about it before is know your audience, know your content, know your distribution. And those 3 are really the pillars. They set up your digital strategy, who you're trying to target, what type of content you're going to produce, and how you're going to deliver it on the different social media platforms. So that's the first 3 pillars. Know your audience, know your content, know your distribution. One that we added working with a client this year was know your destination. And so partly it's what is your website, where are you sending your fans, and then also what's the digital architecture that sits underneath that so you can track them, remarket to them. So no destination is really around what does your website and app deliver and how do you send people to it. So it, again, like all of the digital dollars pillars, it can be set aside and done in a silo, or it can be done in the connected workshop experience across all the pillars. Then the last 2 are really specific to sport. Know your value, how you can develop a rate card across your social media platforms to understand what you're delivering for your sponsors and help tell the story to them on what you're delivering and how valuable it is, the content you're producing, to both not only warm your fans up to that brand, but then also deliver some really important digital metrics that they're looking for. And then the last one is know your pitch, how to wrap it all together, how to pull it all together from a digital point of view, from a sales capture and sales lead capture point of view, potentially for your partners. That's what know your pitch is. So how to help your commercial team to better deliver and pitch digital opportunities to partners. So digital dollars works for a team, league, stadium, athlete, and as I said before, any business. You can take those first 4 pillars and really set up your digital strategy. So digitaldollars.com is where you can find out more info, but you can always email me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, and say, hey, we want to look at improving our process to make sure that our content is hitting the mark with both our audience and our fans, but also our partners. That's exactly what it's there for. A bit of a recap for those of you who have been following me online across socials and also mentioned in the last podcast, I was up for a board position at Collingwood Football Club. Unfortunately, I did not get the votes to succeed in securing a spot. So I guess I offered to provide some feedback. So what did I learn? What I did learn is digital can cut through the noise. I did succeed in cutting through the noise without traditional media and reaching a lot of Collingwood fans and engaging them in a lot of conversations. I did joke that I was running Barack Obama's digital plan from 2008, but it still was rather effective in reaching a lot of fans. One thing that I do know now, in hindsight, is the campaigning starts before the campaign. So maybe there could have been more work that I could have done prior to the nominations being announced, and preparing, my my approach before then and making that a bit more visible, as a lot of people put their votes in as soon as they knew, as soon as they got their voting ballot. And so that's also a big part of it, importance of voting blocks. I think I spoke to a lot of Collingwood fans, but the way the voting rights are, I probably didn't speak to enough of the voting fans that had voting rights. So I'm a big believer in that Collingwood should widen its voting rights and allow more people to vote. And so I got a lot of support for that, but unfortunately those people couldn't vote. So what are the next steps? Well, I'm meeting with Jeff Brown early in 2022 to discuss how I can potentially help Collingwood. I'm still a big believer in that boards, both in sport, business, sports tech, need someone with digital expertise that can help navigate the ever-changing landscape and give the green light to the digital teams, like the ones at Collingwood, and they're doing a terrific job there, the green light to push harder and go harder in that space, because there's still a lot of upside. So I look forward to meeting with Jeff. I wish him all the best as the new Collingwood president. And I guess the main theme is upon review is I'm just going to keep putting my hand up, not only for the board position or to help, in this case, Collingwood Football Club, but I think it has been something that's set me up and served me well, especially over the past 12 years. I could quote Wayne Gretzky, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take," or that might be a quote from Michael Scott from The Office. I'm not quite sure. But one of the things is I'm not gonna die wondering. When I was looking back and reviewing the campaign and missing out, it was really obvious that a lot of big decisions that I've made, both personally and professionally, over the past 20 years, but over the past 12 years, if I'm just looking at Sports Geek, have helped me grow and helped me become the person I am today. So whether it's starting a business, starting Sports Geek from nothing, into an industry and into a segment that didn't exist, and trying to, I guess, educate the industry and tell everyone that people will need sports geeks, and quite happy to say that has been a successful prediction, to even the early days, pitching myself on stage back in 2010 when Simon Arkwright was running the sports, his fantastic conferences in Melbourne and Sydney, able to get myself up on stage for a short while was a real Kickstarter for the business. It gave me connections to the US market, to amazing people like Christine Stoffel, who then I did the same thing. I reached out to Christine and spoke on stages in LA and Miami and London. And that can all be pointed back to that first putting my hand up and saying, hey, can I go up on stage? And then doing things like learning improv, which gave me the skills to be able to speak when I've lost my voice, or doing things like bidding on and succeeding in getting an esports franchise, which has become gravitas and has helped me learn a lot about the world of gaming and esports, as well as performing stand-up and pushing myself to do new things. So whether I go and do stand-up again, but I definitely know it has helped improve me as a speaker. So I can really tie all of these decisions, whether I've succeeded or not succeeded, as a way for me to grow, and also it opens up new opportunities. So where do I see a failed board position heading? I potentially see, I still see myself being on the Pies board in some time in the future. I look forward to talking to Jeff about that. I'm going to keep putting my hand up, but I also am putting a hand up to any sports team or organisation or sports technology startup that is looking for the expertise and skill sets and network that I can bring. So if you're a startup or you're a sports org and you think I can help, please get in touch. Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. I expect 2022 to be another year of big swings. I'm really excited for what I'm doing in a few different spaces. I've been able to partner with Fawn Crabtree to launch Cali Digital this year, applying all the principles of digital to dollars. But in the property market, everyone needs digital. They need to know their audience. They need to know what content they need to produce. They need to know how to distribute it and how to acquire leads. and we've been able to use a lot of the principles of digital to dollars in that business. So if there's any way I can help you, whether it's you or your organisation to make one of those big swings, make one of those big changes. I love playing in the space where people are pushed out of their comfort zone and really pushing for change. I am a change agent. I do help people find new methods and processes to better what they do. I'm very good at making teams be very efficient and use the tools and overproduce in terms of output in what they can do, leveraging some of those skills and those tools that are available. So please reach out, book in a time for a call, sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. I'd really love to hear from you. And as I always say, I love working with people who listen to the podcast. On the podcast note, don't forget the replay series, which is something we kick off in post-Christmas time. It's going to kick off from December 26th. You'll be able to catch up on some of the best episodes in the Sports Geek archive. So if you haven't caught up with a bunch of episodes from this year and you're having a little bit of a break and you're going for a walk along the beach if you're here in Australia, or if you're traveling in the Northern Hemisphere, there will be some podcasts in your feed to give a listen to if you haven't listened to, and a lot of them are worth the re-listen. So that's it from me. That's it from me for 2021. Until next year, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Have you listened to the Sports Geek Amplify series? Go to sportsgeekamplify.com to listen.